For today's video, you can see very clearly that we are zoomed in really close to the actual sewing portion of our sewing machine. And specifically, we're going to talk today about this little feature right here, the sewing machine needle. Because if you don't have this installed or working right, you're not doing any sewing, because it all boils down to this needle. You want to have the right needle installed the right way so that when you sit down to sew, you can actually do this. Hassle-free sewing. Hello, I'm Patty, and welcome to my handmade lifestyle. I go by Patty Mac Makes everywhere online, and in today's video, I want to share some what I hope is really helpful information about changing out your sewing machine needles. It's really super important. It's often overlooked. And if you want to sew all of these fun projects, because I'm going to show you how to do them, you're going to need to know how to change that machine needle. It's really important. So make sure that you stick around for the whole video, because I'm going to show you exactly how to change the needle. And if you subscribe to the channel, you will be notified when all of these fun tutorials are published, because I haven't made them yet. Okay, let's jump into today's video. Every 6 to 8 hours of sewing, you're going to want to replace that needle. And you think about it, especially if you're sewing masks, and I know a lot of you are sewing masks right now. Your little needle down here, here's your tip end. It's a lot of puncturing that fabric, and it's going to get dull. And if you are having issues with your sewing, it can be a lot of things. One of the things to troubleshoot is how old is your needle? And, I've read a lot of posts where people are making, sitting there sewing like, 6 and 8 hours a day or more on these masks, and I'm telling you right now, your needles are dull. So if you're not changing them every day, you should be changing them every day. Yes, you've heard me right. If you're sewing with that kind of fervor, you're gonna need to change your needle. So let's look at actual needles. The kind of fabric that you use determines the kind of needle that you want to install. And for me personally, I primarily sew cotton. I like what they call home deck, which is home decor, pillows, softies, things like that. So it's a lot of cotton. And if you're making masks, you're going to be using a lot of cotton. So when you go to get your needles, you might see these. This is the Schmetz brand. This is a very well-known brand. They're everywhere. They're a good needle. And here's what I want you to see. I want you to see that it's universal. Okay, that means it'll fit any machine. And down here, this 80-12. That is how heavy duty the needles are. And an 80-12 is basically like an all-purpose needle. So if you're doing just basic type sewing, that should be perfectly fine for you. So like the things I sew that are generally just a couple of thicknesses of fabric, maybe a thickness of fabric with some interfacing, things like that. Those are going to sew fine on these all-purpose needles. You can also find like this. This is another Schmetz. And let's see here. This one is like it's like a variety pack, so to speak. So we've got 70s, 80s, and 90s. And as we move up, the needles are a little more heavy duty. And so the 90 is for a little bit heavier weight than the 80, than the 70, etc. Let's take a look at some of these sewing machine needles that I have in my collection. And here's what I want you to consider. You really need to consider needles as an expendable part of your sewing experience. They should be changed on a regular basis. People disagree to how often. What I hear is everywhere from 6 to 8 hours. So if you're in that time frame, you should go ahead and change the needle. If you're having issues, it's always a good idea to go ahead and change the needle. It can cause all kinds of things. Like you can have this really weird situation where the thread is literally jumping out of the needle. So you'll be sewing along, and then all of a sudden, you can literally be sewing along and not have thread in the needle. It's like it jumps out. It is crazy. When that happens, definitely change your needle. And if you can't remember the last time you changed your needle, it's probably time. So consider that. The weight and thickness of the materials you're using is going to affect the size and the type of the needle that you use. So keep in mind that heavier fabrics will need larger needles. And the larger the needle, the easier your sewing experience is going to be. What I have for the most part are just universal needles, like normal weight. So they're good for sewing maybe 2 thicknesses of fabric, or maybe 2 thicknesses with some interfacing. But other than that, they're going to have some trouble. So if you have this little Singer Brilliance and you are sewing masks and you're having some trouble, I would consider getting heavier weighted needles. And you're going to want to look for something in the range of a 100 or a 110 or maybe even a 120, because honestly, the fabric is so thick. So the larger the needle, the heavier weight it's going to sew. And if you're sewing denim and leather, you need specifically denim and leather needles. So let me show you what I have here. This is a very common brand. It's Schmetz, and you can pick these up anywhere. I did get these in Joann. They're easy to find in normal conditions. I don't know what it looks like in the craft store right now, but when things are normal, it's very easy to get machine needles. So you have the Schmetz, which is just like a universal. It's like a generic, basically. And then these are specifically a Singer brand needle. So I got a couple of different things here. These are like the regular universals, and you can see here that it's 80-12. So that's just like your regular medium weight of needle. So that is perfect for the kind of projects that I like to sew, which are housewares. They call it home decorating. So pillows. I like to sew bags. I love to sew bags, curtains, all that kind of stuff. This 80-12 is great because I just use quilting cotton. I like to use quilting cotton. So universal 80-12. This needle type, this is called Jersey ballpoint needles, and these are for sewing knit fabrics. So the tip end is a little bit different, and I got this because I want to sew some pajama tops to go with my pajama bottoms, and I have some knit fabric for that. And you need to use the ball pointed needles when you're sewing knits. And you can see this is just another regular 80-12. So 80-12 is just like, it's like your everyday sewing type of needle. This one is a Singer specific. These are called the titanium quilting needles, and you can see it comes with both an 80 and a 90. So I've got a little bit of both. And this is a Schmetz that came with a collection. So it has 70s, 80s, and some 90s. And the way that you get into these little packages is, this is how I do it. So I turn it over, and then you use your thumbs and you slide up. And sometimes they can be tricky. So slide up, okay, until this is above the front plastic. And then you fold it back, okay, and then you just take out the needle you're going to use. Oops. Just remove the needle that you're going to use. And also, I don't know if you can see that or not. Let's see. Yes. Okay. See how they're color coded? So the 70s are all green, the 80s are orange, and the 90s are blue. And I am looking at my machine right now, and I have a 90. So I have a little bit of a heavier weight needle. And I also can look at this and see that, oh, I'm almost out of the 90s and the Schmetz. So I probably need to go ahead and put that on my list of supplies to replenish. So that's that. And then to close it up, you just slide it back down. And then your needles are all in the little, it's kind of like a matchbook. And that's how you keep them. I'll show you how I keep my needles stored on my pegboard. I have shown you this pegboard in other videos. I have a specific video on how I put it together. And you can do anything you want, but I'll show you how I did mine. And so I have these little slide out hanging containers, and I just keep the needles in one of those. And it's easy for me to find them. It's easy for me to see what I actually have. And I can keep myself supplied like I need to be supplied. So when the time comes, I have needles when I need them. You don't want to be running out of stuff. That is like the worst. Don't run out of supplies in the middle of a project. Okay, with the needles, this side over here is what's going to go into the machine. And I want you to see how it has a flat side. This is very hard to show. Okay, it has, when you look at it, see there's a flat side. So it has a flat side and it has a rounded side. There it is. There's your flat side. The flat side, for the most part, is going to go installed to the back. And the Singer Brilliance that we're looking at here, you want the flat side to the back. So you need to check your individual machine guide in your book to see what is appropriate for your machine. But 9 times out of 10, the flat side goes to the back. For today's demonstration, I'm just going to reuse this same needle. I'm going to do that because I've only been sewing for a couple of hours on this needle. I don't need to change it, but I want you to see how it's done. So we're going to do a couple of things first. We're going to go ahead and snip our thread and pull that out, okay? And we're going to go ahead and take the presser foot off, and that is just by the lever in the back. We'll do a whole other video on presser feet, so don't freak out about that. But just know they do come off and on really easy, and that's perfectly fine. You're gonna wanna change your presser feet as you sew more and more. If you look in the little kit area that comes with your machine, you're gonna find some different things, and you're gonna find this little mini screwdriver. This is like really important. You want to hold on to that because you're going to need that to work on your machine. To change the needle, you want to have that little screwdriver that's in your toolkit. This is really important for you to hold on to. Don't lose this. And you're going to locate this little screw head right here. And you're going to grasp the needle so it doesn't just fall. And then rotate that screw towards you. Okay, when it's loose, you can do it with your hand. And your needle just comes right out. Voila, look at that. So now it's out. And I was telling you there's a flat side and a rounded side, so make sure that when you get your fresh needle, the flat side is facing away from you. Okay, and then you're just gonna come up under here, all right? And get that needle up as high as it will go. You'll feel when it meets resistance, and hold it in place. and tighten your screw housing. Okay, you want to make sure it's pretty tight. You don't want to fool around with that. And then we'll put our presser foot back on, and just this little bar that's right here, you're going to kind of put it under. You'll see the groove, and lower the foot, or lower the housing. And when it's in the right place, it will just snap right in. Okay, so now we have our new needle, and let's go ahead and rethread. So we'll pull our thread from the upper housing. The needle's in the uppermost position. Press down on the automatic threader, and then see how this little gadget here, it comes around and it cradles the needle, and what it's doing is there's a little tiny little hook, and that little teeny tiny hook is coming through the eye of the needle. So you're going to get your thread over to the leftmost, and then just kind of with light tension pull to the back, and then that little hook grabs hold of the thread and pulls it through, and you just have to practice. Okay, and I've already got my bobbin thread ready to go, so let's see what happens. If I put everything in right, it should sew without a hitch. So let's just do that live on camera for you right now. No edits. We're just going to continue with the same stitch. Okay, so here we go. If you're sewing along on your Singer Brilliance, this is stitch number 61. Okay, let's pull it out. And it was absolutely perfect. I mean, it sewed without a hitch. So that means my needle is installed correctly. And yeah, so everything's working as it should. So that is how you change the needle. Okay, I hope that was helpful for you, and if you have any questions, you can drop them down below. Oh, you should always make sure, I should tell you this, to thread out that last little guide. There we go. Now we're set. Okay, yeah, so if you have questions, drop them below. I will do my best to answer them, and I'll see you in the next video. Make sure that you're changing out those machine needles.